Eleanor McGregor arrived precisely at 7 o'clock on Friday evening. She was everything Alice had feared and more. She was a tall, slender woman with perfectly coiffed silver hair and a string of pearls that looked more real than anything Alice owned. Her beige Chanel suit was understated, elegant, and probably cost more than Alice's car. Her handshake was firm, her smile was polite, and her eyes, a cool, intelligent blue, missed absolutely nothing. They scanned the small apartment, taking in the worn but comfortable sofa, the stack of Tommy's textbooks on the coffee table, and the slightly crooked painting on the wall, all in a single sweeping glance. Before Eleanor could say a word, Carrie, dressed in a flowing bright purple caftan, swept forward. "Ellie, you must be exhausted after your flight," she boomed, taking Eleanor's hand in both of hers. "Let me get you a drink. I brought a lovely Chardonnay. It comes in a box so you know it's fresh." Eleanor retrieved her hand, her polite smile tightening almost imperceptibly. "Eleanor is fine, thank you, and water would be lovely." The evening quickly became a tense, surreal, theatrical performance. Carrie, the irresistible force, launched a charm offensive of epic proportions. She told loud, boisterous stories about Mel's childhood. She insisted on showing Eleanor her press clippings from the House of Veal. She topped off Eleanor's water glass every 5 minutes with a flourish. Eleanor, the immovable object, weathered the storm with an icy, unshakable poise. She responded to Carrie's effusive monologues with quiet, monosyllabic answers. She directed a series of polite, laser-guided questions at Alice. "Robert tells me you work at a diner," she said, the word hanging in the air as if it were a foreign object. "Yes. I'm a waitress at Mel's," Alice replied, her voice steady despite the frantic fluttering in her chest. "How industrious," Eleanor commented, taking a delicate sip of water. "And you have a son in college. It must be a challenge to manage all of that on your own." "It has been," Alice said simply, "but we manage." "And you also have a singing hobby," Eleanor continued, her tone making it sound as trivial as collecting stamps. "Robert is very taken with it." Alice felt herself shrinking under the polite, relentless scrutiny. She was being weighed, measured, and found wanting. She was a waitress, a divorcee, a woman who sang in bars. In Eleanor McGregor's world, she was a liability, a complication in the perfect, successful life of her blind son. The air in the small living room grew thick with unspoken judgment. Carrie's stories were falling flat. Alice's attempts at polite conversation were met with cool civility. The meeting of the matriarchs was an unmitigated disaster. It was Rob who finally broke the tension. He had been sitting quietly on the sofa, listening to the entire exchange, his face unreadable. Now he turned his head toward his mother. "Mother," he said, his voice calm but firm, "you've heard me talk about Alice's singing, but I don't think you can possibly understand it just from my description. It's something you have to experience." He then turned to Alice. "Alice, would you sing for us?" The request was a lightning bolt in the tense room. Sing now, it felt like the most insane idea in the world. Her throat was tight with anxiety, her hands were trembling. But then she looked at Rob, at the complete unwavering faith on his face. He wasn't asking her to perform. He was offering her a lifeline, a way to speak a language more honest than words. She nodded a small, jerky movement. She retrieved her guitar from its stand in the corner, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She sat on the small stool by the window, avoiding Eleanor's cool, curious gaze. What could she possibly sing for this woman? She didn't choose a flashy number or a sad ballad. She chose a simple song she'd been working on herself. It was a song about finding light in unexpected places, about building a home not from wood and nails, but from moments of grace. Her fingers found the familiar chords, and she began to sing. Her voice, shaky at first, grew stronger with each note filling the small apartment. It was raw and honest and achingly beautiful. It was the voice of a woman who had known hardship and heartbreak, but who had never, ever surrendered her hope. It was the voice of Pudge Spivak and Alice Hyatt, the waitress and the mother, the dreamer and the survivor. It was her soul offered up in 3 simple verses and a chorus. When the last note faded into silence, no one moved. The air, once thick with tension, was now still and resonant. Alice finally lifted her head and looked at Eleanor McGregor. The mask of polite, impenetrable reserve was gone. In its place was something softer, something vulnerable. The cool blue eyes were glistening with unshed tears. For the first time, Eleanor wasn't looking at a waitress. She was seeing the woman her son had fallen in love with. She was seeing her strength, her resilience, her heart. She finally understood. Later, as Rob and Alice walked her to the waiting car, Eleanor was quiet. Just before she ducked into the back seat, she turned to Alice. She placed a cool, gentle hand on her arm. "You have a remarkable gift, my dear," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Robert is a very lucky man." It wasn't a gushing acceptance, it wasn't an invitation to join the family, but it was a beginning, it was a concession, it was a victory. As the Rolls-Royce pulled away, Alice stood on the sidewalk, the cool night air on her face. She felt Rob's hand find hers, his grip, warm and steady. The audition was over. And she had passed not by changing who she was, but by having the courage to show exactly who she was, one heartfelt note at a time. Chapter 16, Moving Day. A month after Eleanor McGregor's fateful visit, a new kind of whirlwind descended on Phoenix. This one came in the form of a massive 18-wheeler moving truck with Dallas TX emblazoned on its side, which navigated the quiet, tree-lined street with the lumbering grace of a blue whale. It sighed to a stop in front of the sand-colored ranch house, its air brakes hissing, and officially heralded the beginning of Rob and Alice's new life. Rob himself was on a final, unavoidable trip to Dallas, a week of meetings to formally hand over the reins of his old office. He had left Alice with a set of keys, a credit card for pizza, and his complete trust to oversee the move. "Just make sure the movers put the piano in the living room and not the bathroom," he joked. "Otherwise, do whatever you think is right. It's your house, too." His faith in her was both a comfort and a terror. She stood on the perfect green lawn, a clipboard in her hand, feeling a sense of authority and imposter syndrome in equal measure. She was the acting CEO of this domestic merger, and she was determined to make it a smooth one. Her determination lasted for approximately 7 minutes. That's when the help arrived. The first to appear was Mel rattling up to the curb in his ancient rust-colored pickup truck. He lumbered out carrying a large igloo cooler. "All right, Bones, don't you worry," he announced as if she'd sent out a distress signal. "The foreman is here. These professional mover guys, they're all lazy. You gotta watch them like a hawk." He patted his cooler, brought provisions, eggs, salad, sandwiches, and beer. Nothing gets a job done like warm beer. Next came Vera, arriving by taxi, clutching a jumbo roll of bubble wrap to her chest like a life preserver. "I thought we could use some extra protection," she explained, her eyes wide with the stress of the occasion. "You never know. Some of these boxes look very boxy. They could get dented." Finally, a cloud of perfume and hairspray signaled the arrival of Jolene, who was dressed for the occasion in a pair of white designer jeans, high-heeled boots, and a silk blouse. "Okay, I'm here to supervise the aesthetics," she declared, striking a pose. "We can't just let them plop things down anywhere. A room needs to have a flow, a narrative." The last to arrive naturally was Carrie Sharples, who swept in with the air of a general arriving to command her troops. "I've brought my color swatches," she announced, fanning out a deck of paint sample cards. "This living room is crying out for a nice evening dove, or perhaps a gentle fawn." The professional movers, a trio of burly, stoic men, exchanged weary glances. Alice just closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and embraced the chaos. What followed was less a move and more a surreal multi-act play of comedic errors. Mel appointed himself co-foreman and immediately got into a jurisdictional dispute with the actual foreman over the best way to angle a sofa through a doorway. Vera, tasked with unpacking a box of towels, spent 20 minutes meticulously refolding each one into a perfect swan shape before placing them in the linen closet. Jolene, true to her word, focused on the aesthetics. "Stop," she commanded as two movers carried in a magnificent mahogany dining table. "Turn it a quarter inch to the left." "No, my other left, it needs to catch the afternoon light." Carrie, meanwhile, launched a full-scale interior design consultation, getting into a heated but good-natured debate with Mel over the principles of feng shui. "The head of the bed absolutely cannot face the door, Melvin," she insisted. "It's bad for your chi." "The only chi I'm worried about is the chi-si on my sandwich," he retorted. "Put the bed where it fits." Alice, the frazzled ringleader of this circus, darted between them all. She intercepted Vera before she could bubble wrap the television. She gently redirected Jolene's focus from the mover's posture to a box of curtains. She refereed the great bed placement debate of 2025. All the while, the physical evidence of Rob's life was flowing into the house, a steady stream of quiet elegance that stood in stark contrast to the noisy chaos of her helpers. There were boxes labeled classical records and first edition poetry. There was a beautiful worn leather armchair that Alice could instantly picture Rob sitting in. There was artwork sophisticated and modern that made the paintings in her own apartment look like children's drawings. The movers, with a reverence that Mel found deeply suspicious, carefully wheeled in a magnificent baby grand piano, its polished ebony surface gleaming. In the middle of the afternoon, the chaos hit a crescendo. Mel was trying to prove a point about leverage by lifting a box clearly marked fragile, crystal, that was far too heavy for him. Vera had somehow gotten herself tangled in a set of Venetian blinds. And Carrie and Jolene were engaged in a serious discussion about whether the piano was more summer or autumn. Feeling overwhelmed, Alice slipped away. She walked down the hall and into the master bedroom, which was still empty save for a few stray boxes. The room was quiet, filled with the soft, peaceful light of the afternoon. She went to the large window that overlooked the backyard, where the bougainvillea blossoms were a riot of brilliant pink against the sandy-colored wall. She looked back into the room at the chaotic scene unfolding in the living room beyond. She saw Mel's cooler sitting next to a box labeled 18th century Hepplewhite chairs. She saw Vera's bubble wrap next to a crate containing Rob's collection of antique maps. Her life and his all jumbled together in a beautiful, impossible mess. A wave of emotion so potent it almost buckled her knees washed over her. It was terrifying, it was wonderful, it was real. A sound from the front of the house broke her reverie. It was a familiar voice cutting through the din. "It looks like I got here just in time," Rob said. He stood in the entryway, having arrived from the airport sooner than expected. He was leaning against the doorframe, a travel bag at his feet, his face tired from his flight. He stood perfectly still, just listening. He heard Mel and his mother in a heated discussion about color theory. He heard Vera gently trying to extricate herself from the blinds. He heard Jolene ask one of the movers if his t-shirt came in a V-neck. And through it all, he heard the frantic, loving heartbeat of this impossible, wonderful family. Alice walked out to meet him, a smudge of dust on her cheek, her hair falling out of its clip. She looked exhausted, frazzled, and more beautiful than he had ever seen her. A slow, brilliant smile spread across his face. He didn't look angry or annoyed by the chaos that had invaded his pristine new home. He looked utterly, completely content. He navigated the obstacle course of boxes and people as if he had a perfect map in his mind, walking straight to her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulled her close, and kissed her right there in the middle of the madness. The arguments and anxieties around them seemed to fade into a distant hum. "It's perfect," he whispered against her ear, his voice full of a deep, happy satisfaction. "It already sounds like home." Later that evening, the movers were gone, and the setting sun cast long shadows through the still, unfurnished rooms. The five of them, plus Rob, sat on packing crates and overturned boxes in the living room, the grand piano standing sentinel in the corner. They ate cold pizza from the box Rob had ordered, washing it down with the last of Mel's warm beer. It wasn't the elegant housewarming they might have one day with champagne and catered canapes. It was better. It was theirs. The house was no longer an empty building filled with a stranger's possessions. It was a home already infused with the loud, chaotic, and undeniable power of love. The merger was complete.